The Ridgeway, Britain's oldest road. For 5,000 years it has connected our ancient monuments and landmarks along the hilltops of the Chilterns and the Wessex Downs. Today, the Ridgeway National Trail follows some of its course, starting in the Neolithic landscape of Avebury in Wiltshire and running 87 miles northeast to Ivanhoe Beacon in Buckinghamshire. But was Avebury really the Ridgeway's southern terminus? And was there some route connecting Avebury to Stonehenge 25 miles to the south on Salsibury Plain? There are tantalising clues of fragments of the Ridgeway which remain south of Avebury, in modern maps, in old maps, in the Saxon charters, in Lidar data, and from aerial photography. So I wanted to join up the dots and retrace the route from that terminus of the modern Ridgeway National Trail at Overton Hill near Avebury to Broadbury Banks on the edge of Salsibury Plain. To help me in this quest, I called on aerial photographer, fellow Ridgeway enthusiast and all-round nice guy, Hedley Thorne. Together we set out to find the Lost Ridgeway. Welcome to another Tweedy Outdoors video. Today I'm going to be trying to trace the Lost Ridgeway, and I have help. I have with me today the great Hedley Thorne.
Hello.
Hi Hedley.
To be here. Thank you for having me.
Up there the Ridgeway heads to Ivanhoe Beacon, but this way, a now lost remnant of the Ridgeway. G.B. Grundy wrote a paper in 1918 on the ancient highways of Wessex and gave a turn-by-turn account for this section of the Lost Ridgeway. It starts here, where the Ridgeway crosses the line of the Roman road running west from Cunitio near Marlborough. Presumably that Roman road is referring to what we now know as the A4. As noted by Grundy, at this point the Ridgeway crosses the Kennet. So we've just passed through the village of East Kennet, and this is one of the first sections that piqued my curiosity about this lost route of the Ridgeway. This is a track heading out of East Kennet where it splits off from the road, and it's one of the first places that I saw those oldie worldy letters on the Ordnance Survey map that suggested that this was a now forgotten extension to the Ridgeway. Grundy also mentions a long barrow to the west of the road. Interestingly, he doesn't name it as East Kennet Long Barrow, but I'm sure it must be. Gained a little bit of height, and already we've got this great view down to East Kennet. Hedley tells me that the collection of sarsen stones over there, you can probably just about see, I will zoom in a bit, are potentially a stone circle on Cowdown here, just off the Ridgeway. We're now roughly at the area on the map named Redshaw. This is where Wansdyke crosses over the Lost Ridgeway. Grundy mentions this.
This is a very significant area because you've got the old Ridgeway coming through here, so that would have been in use for somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 years, and then it's crossing this is actually later than the Ridgeway by the sounds of it. We're thinking this is probably 7th or 8th century. One of the theories that's being looked into is that it was a trade boundary between Mercia and Wessex, and so in itself it would have also been a route.
I sort of expect there to be fairies prancing around. Yeah, it's got that kind of look to it, hasn't it? Yes. In fact, I'm almost disappointed there aren't.
We're out into this amazing sort of landscape, and the Ridgeway here would have served a vital purpose. On the left you've got Knap Hill, which is a Neolithic enclosure. You've also got a Romano-British plateau enclosure to the left of that, and there's a path going down that effectively meets up with Ridgeway at the bottom. On the other side you've got Adam's Grave on Walker's Hill, and so that implies that there's some fairly significant settlements back here.
This is another waypoint called out by Grundy in his itinerary. An earthwork immediately west of the road. The land to the west of this part of the road is thickly strewn with tumuli, camps and earthworks. This is the area around Knap Cottage, or Newtown as it's marked today on the OS map.
Afternoon, ladies.
We're taking a quick detour from the Ridgeway here to take a look at Adam's Grave. No,
Yes.
Adam's Grave, yeah.
Adam's Grave on
Sudden
Water.
memory failure there.
It's probably still significant to the Ridgeway, insofar as this would be a prominent burial area for one of the settlements around here that the Ridgeway went to and from.
Terrible camera work time. I feel more conscious than usual about the terrible camera work being in the presence of Headley and his, hopefully you've by now seen some spectacular drone footage. Feeling my land-based footage may pale into insignificance, but even on foot, look at that view. If this is indeed the ancient route of the Ridgeway, it's quite a modest section, but I guess we were saying back there, in more open countryside, it didn't necessarily need to be a single path. You could sort of roam a little bit free.
It could also be, there's a little bit down to our left down there, so there's a possibility that could have been, I think, joining where the road is now.
That track
but
down
I think
there.
it's also important to remember the Ridgeway probably wasn't a single track. You would have had parallel paths like this, and so this almost certainly was part of the Ridgeway, and maybe that was at a different time as well. But certainly, looking at the maps, looking at Google Earth, looking at Lidar, this is the route that we're pretty certain it came down between the hills.
Does this look to you, Headley, a bit like a holloway here? We're sort of walking on the side of this almost ditch-like structure
like
here.
Yeah, so holloways come about basically just because of, you know, traffic over time.
Footfall
And traffic, and I think
Hooffall.
that's what we're looking at here is just a route that people generally gravitated to. It had no label, it wasn't called the Ridgeway, but it was a route that people just, like ants coming together to make a line, and over time that forms a route which then becomes more kind of official, I guess.
It's a pretty significant churn down here. We sort of possibly strayed off if there is such a thing as the Ridgeway up there, and trying to cross the road over here, but you can definitely see some fairly significant footfall, a sort of holloway down there. Short section of road here, and then we are informed by the OS map there'll be a track the other side which will take us into Alton Priors.
Come on then,
I was waiting here to pick up the camera.
YouTubers.
We're now on this track that is marked on the OS map with those oldie worldy letters as the Ridgeway, and I think this is the last southernmost section of the Ridgeway that actually is still in use as a publicly accessible track today. Beyond here we still have a couple of fragments, but they're on private land, they're not used as public rights of way today. So this is, I'm finding this quite exciting.
I am as well. I am as well.
On some level this is just a track along the side of a field, but this feels like, you know, the final vestige of the Ridgeway that is still kind of fully in use today.
I'm excited about the prospect of you cooking.
Alton Barnes white horse over there in the distance with, as Headley points out, a real white horse and a variety of other horses in the foreground. So this has felt like very much a modern track, possibly on the route of an ancient track up until now, but that track sort of bends to the right here, and the line of the Ridgeway apparently goes down this tiny little path, which is a bit harder to believe, but perhaps when we get down there we'll see some more convincing ancient track route.
Definitely.
If I don't fall down on the way down. It's quite steep, isn't it? Oh, what do we have here?
A straight section of track, which is an alternative.
Why were we not on that
maybe
before?
Ridgeway.
Well, this is nice, isn't it? I mean, this looks a bit more convincingly old, because this could actually be a wide holloway here, a modern road here, a metalled road. But I think this is probably still for now the course of that ancient track that we were following just now.
Yeah.
And then we're on the edge of Alton Priors, a reassuring amount of thatch here. The road is now bending round to the right a bit. We may be temporarily off the route of the Ridgeway track, maybe.
Yes.
And but there is that remnant a bit further on.
And I've had a very good idea of a really good place for lunch. It's the northernmost source of the River Avon, and it's just over in those trees over there.
Sounds good. Quite exciting moment for me. This is the last marked remnant of the Ridgeway on the Ordnance Survey map, at least here at Alton Priors. We do have special permission to be here.
So I'm going to leave you here. I'm going to have to, because I've got my car back at Avebury. I'll bid you adieu on the rest of your journey today.
Hopefully here you can get a sense for these ditches, these earthworks that are believed to be one of the last vestiges that's actually visible of the Ridgeway here at Alton Priors, just before it crosses the Kennet and Avon Canal a little bit further south from here. We're definitely into the part where most sources are unclear of the exact route of the Ridgeway beyond Alton Priors. Grundy seems to think that it goes in a relatively straight line from Honey Street to where it would have crossed the modern rail track at Woodborough Station. Still have many miles to cover to get to Salsibury Plain, but this is just a bit too tempting. The Barge Inn on the Kennet and Avon Canal near Honey Street. Cheers from the Barge Inn. Sometimes pubs just look too good to walk past. There's a mural inside of the Avebury landscape, beers from Stonehenge ales, and there's a sarsen stone in the beer garden. What more could I want? So I'm passing through Honey Street. I took a look at the English place names survey to see what the derivation of Honey Street was, and intriguingly there is a suggestion that it somehow comes from a point in the landscape where the Ridgeway passed through a muddy area. I'm not quite sure how you get from muddy to honey, but there you go. Afternoon, ladies. Behind me is Honey Street Farm, and I think beyond there in the fields the other side, alas, no public access to it, are probably the last remnants that you can see on Lidar of the Ridgeway, and they're also the last remnants that are sighted by GB Grundy. So I don't know if perhaps in the intervening 100 years or so that's been ploughed out and it's no longer visible from the land. Quite a long tramp through fields from here on, but turning around in a nice view back to Pewsey Downs, you can just about see the White Horse again. Beautiful old oak tree there, just coming up to the train line where this footpath crosses over. Quite impressed actually that for a very minor footpath it actually has a proper footbridge to go over the railway tracks. This is where Woodborough Station would have once stood. You can still see a bit of a remnant of the sidings. Woodborough Station is on the Reading to Taunton line, which opened here in 1862, and sadly that station was closed as part of the Beeching cuts in 1966. This is the point in the video I wish I could somehow use magic YouTube powers to summon allotment fox, because Grundy mentions that a lot of this section is very much dependent on the Anglo-Saxon charters for trying to figure out where the route may have been. The charters that GB Grundy refers to here are those for Beechingstoke and North Newnton. One of them refers to a track merely as weg, which I believe is the Old English for track, and the other refers to a frith heripath, which is a highway or possibly even an army way. Heripaths tended to be fairly significant tracks travelling over long distances, and it's likely that that was actually referring to the Ridgeway here. We are into North Newnton parish. This is the track heading off from the road here. Still a bit hard to say whether this could genuinely be an ancient track, this section here, but it certainly feels a bit more venerable than some of those field side paths I was walking along before. Quite wide actually at this point. You can see the borders there. It's also possibly noteworthy that this track at this point follows the parish boundary, as you can see on the OS map, so that may somehow relate to those Saxon charters that were often describing those land boundaries. GB Grundy also calls out Puckshipton. I think I'm close to there now. There is a Puckshipton house marked near here on the OS map, and it's near to here that the ancient route of the Ridgeway, in his opinion, crosses over the River Avon somewhere around Wilsford. So I think this is at least one crossing of the River Avon as mentioned here. Nice to see this, having had lunch at one of its springs. Looks like the river is quite dispersed here and there may be multiple crossings, but this is possibly part of the broader area known as Wilsford now, into this lovely field strewn with buttercups and dandelions. Grundy may have specifically mentioned this footpath that I'm currently walking on. He writes, from here its line runs along a footpath to the west end of Wilsford village, and thence no doubt it went to join the Ridgeway running east and west on Wilsford Hill. That means up on Salsibury Plain, I think. I think we're coming into the edge of the village of Wilsford. Beautiful thatched cottages here in Wilsford, and look at that wisteria. Tempting to think this short stretch of road may actually follow that ancient Ridgeway route here. Going to leave the road here, take this bridleway. Here begins the final ascent to Broadbury Banks along this bridleway. There are several tracks running up the hillside here towards Salsibury Plain, and it's hard to know which would have been the original route, if there was ever one official route, as we keep saying. But it does seem likely that Broadbury Banks, at least at some point in history, may have been a sort of waymarker, a stopping off point along the way. It's crossing over the A342. I see a familiar face over there. Mr. Headley-Thorne, you are a sight for sore eyes. To give you some advance warning, it looks like Broadbury Banks is not going to be the flashy, all singing, all dancing climax this video may or may not deserve. Bit of a lump over there, perhaps we can get a slightly better view of it. This is the edge of Broadbury Banks. It may not be as old as it is claimed much of the Ridgeway is, but it is sometimes cited as a stopping off point. You can hear the MOD practicing on Salsibury Plain over there in the distance. It is sometimes cited as a stopping off point on the way up to Salsibury Plain for the Ridgeway, possibly an Iron Age hill fort, and I've seen suggestions that it may be linked with the movement of the sarsen stones for Stonehenge that likely came from Westwood near Fifield Down, near Avebury. At least one potential example of some kind of movement, some kind of transport between the site of Avebury and the site of Stonehenge. It seems certain, those two sites being contemporary, that there would have been some movement between the two, and this was likely the primary reason for this lost section of the Ridgeway that I've been trying to follow today. At the top of this track we meet what is now the Imber perimeter path, I think, around the edge of Salsibury Plain, and it's widely reported that there was some sort of Ridgeway-like route running east to west along there, and that eventually connects with what we now know today as the Wessex Ridgeway as well, that leads all the way down to Dorset and to the sea. Well, we have this slightly surreal impromptu air show going on overhead with, are they World War II era?
I think they're World War One.
World War One era biplanes. Bit surreal, but I think we've come to the end of our journey today.
Yes.
What have we learnt, Headley?
We've learnt that you're more capable of walking than I am, and I had to go back and get the car. But I think we've also learned that the Ridgeway actually in places still follows a fairly defined route, and in other places it doesn't.
Yep. And perhaps it was always that way. Perhaps
it could have always been that way. I mean, obviously this is not marked out as a national trail, so it doesn't get the publicity and the maintenance that the Ridgeway National Trail gets nowadays. But I think maybe also since the Industrial Revolution, you got, you know, farmland, agriculture, and industry has kind of, you know, buried it a little bit,
and the military
as
we can hear right now. So I think it's probably time to sign off there. So thank you very much to Headley for all his help today with logistics, with helping me to get to some of those bits that I might not have been otherwise been able to get to, and just general sort of fun company. It's been a
I enjoyed it.
It's been a very nice day out. You can't hear us, can you? There's planes overhead.
Starting to get worried that
we should
we've missed something major in the
perhaps we
news
should
here.
head off.
I think we should head off. Let's get to the safety of the car. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.